And again, I'm just like, I don't see the fucking point of this. Why is it okay to think, why do people think a good punishment is to stop a kid from learning? No, like that would be the... Hi, and welcome back to my channel. It is currently Saturday 11:30ish a.m. and I'm about to start reading for my vlog. So I'm going to be reading These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling. I'm very excited about this. I've read about 30 pages of it and quite liking it so far. It is a YA contemporary fantasy. This is the story of Hannah, who is an elemental witch. She lives in Salem with other witches. So her ex-girlfriend Veronica is a witch as well, and they have to obey certain rules by the witch council, which I believe is their parents. If they reveal their powers or anything like that, they're at risk of losing them and getting them taken away from them, I guess. The regular people that do not have power in Salem are called regs, so regular, I guess. In the first 30 pages, which is all I've read so far, you already figure out that Hannah and Veronica went on a trip to New York where something happened, where whatever Veronica did was the reason why Hannah broke up with her, and they encountered a blood witch, which is like an evil witch that can control you with just a drop of your blood. So when they go to a bonfire, what happens is they hear a scream, so they both run to check it out, and then they find a dead raccoon and some pentacles made of flames. So because it's got these magical symbols, Hannah freaks out and thinks it might be the Blood Witch. Veronica tries to convince her it's probably just a prank and not to tell their parents, because they're probably going to be in trouble if their parents find out, especially since then they'll have to explain what happened in New York and they might be in even bigger trouble. So far I really like it. It's quite fast-paced. I like the writing style. I like the main character's point of view, and I like her friends as well, even the ones that are just the regs. It's quite fun. I think it's going to be a fun, fast read, and I'm excited for it. I hope I'm going to finish it this weekend so that I can move on to the next book and have this vlog be about more than one book. I'm going to stop filming now because it is boiling hot, and I've closed the door and turned off the fan to avoid any noises in the background, and now I'm sweating. So, talk to you guys later. I am currently 60 pages-ish into These Witches Don't Burn. I'm still really liking it. You learn a lot more about the witches and how they work and the council and stuff. I thought Hannah was just a fire witch, but she's actually like an elemental witch, which means she can control any element. You learn that Hannah's grandmother is the high priestess of her coven, and she's like a tough cookie type of woman, very strict, very intense. It's interesting to see the dynamics between Hannah and her family, and also how she feels about her best friend and her family. There's like a couple of passages about how the interactions between her and her best friend's family have changed since she came out, which is quite sad. I think the author does like a good job of adding these moments in about her and her relationships and her sexuality and things like that within the overall fantasy setting, the contemporary fantasy setting of her being a witch and having a witch's family. I think the only thing that bothers me slightly is the fact that at the moment I can't really tell much more about Hannah's personality. It just feels like her entire personality revolves around her magic on the one hand and Veronica on the other hand, and having an ex and being sad about it. And I don't know, like, from the start you can tell that Veronica really wants Hannah back and that she's desperate for her to be back with her, but I feel a bit uncomfortable about the way that she goes on about it and the way that she tries to lure her ex back to her, because it just feels a little bit toxic in a way. I don't know, I just feel like it bothers me the way that she completely dismisses and invalidates the ways that Hannah has broken up with her. The fact that she's even broken up with her at all. That she's pretty much saying like all the time, oh, but you still love me, and tries to touch her again and tries to lure her back in and tries to kiss her again. And it's just a bit toxic. Like, I was not really comfortable with that. It is currently 2 p.m. on Saturday. I've just finished eating. I'm gonna go take a shower and then read some more, and then I'll keep you guys updated. Okay, so I'm about 100 pages or so into These Witches Don't Burn. I'm just like so angry about some things right now that I just wanted to chat through them. So I'm just like, the way the parents react to things in the book is just so annoying, but not just annoying, but kind of almost feels abusive. So first of all, they are completely dismissive of whatever fears Hannah has about like the Blood Witch and things like that. They're like telling her, oh, let the adults take care of coven business, and at some point they're like, oh, you're just children. It's just so dismissive, and I feel like my parents would never have talked to me like that when I was 17. When you're 17, you're so close to being an adult and your opinions are a little bit more formed than that. I don't know, I just feel like I find it really strange. I know it's just like for the story to make it a little bit more interesting because there's more challenges, but it kind of pisses me off a lot. But then the one thing that made me pick up my camera to vlog about this is I got to like page 116 now, and basically something else has happened, and the new detective in town cuffs Hannah but doesn't actually puts charges on her. But then her parents are angry at her for something she literally had no control over, and it feels so wrong. It's like saying to someone, well, if you weren't wearing this you wouldn't get any harassment. It's like, you can't blame the victim of something. It's not because she was accused of it by the detective that she did do it, and as her parents they should believe her first unless there's a reason not to, and so far it doesn't seem to me like Hannah is like a delinquent or a wild child at all. I feel like they should trust her slightly more just as parents. Like, that would be the normal thing to do, to trust that your child didn't do the crime that they're accused of. The first people that should have your back are your parents. Then the second thing is she uses magic on her to get the truth out of her, And then they threaten to put a binding charm on her, which will bind her from using her powers. And from what I understand, witches have that when they're younger and they have no control over their powers. They've got a binding charm on until they're able to control them better and know when to use, when not to use them. So she's experienced that before, and she talks about it like it's this big block on something that's so natural that it's really awful, and it's like, it almost sounds like torture. And the fact that her parents are first of all using magic to get the truth out of her, and second, threatening to use magic to bind her powers, I just find that borderline abusive. Like, I don't know, I'm just really confused by that, and by the fact that that's a normal punishment. Shouldn't just be grounded be the basic thing? But I'd almost say the fact that the book is eliciting such like anger from me is probably a good sign that it's well written, because otherwise I just wouldn't care at all. So at the moment I am enjoying it despite that, and I will catch up with you guys later when I've read a little bit more and have more of an idea of what's happening. I'm currently 238 pages into the book, so I've got less than 100 pages left to finish it. Lots has happened and the pace is really fast, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I've got a couple of complaints, as in things that did bother me during this read at the moment. The fact that earlier when her and Veronica do something that Lady Ariana, who's like the high priestess of the coven, she deems it unacceptable and she deems it to be against the rules of the coven. When she punishes them, she basically says like, okay, Veronica basically needs to wait much longer before she graduates as a witch. I can't really remember what the terms were, but it's kind of something like that. And Hannah also has delays in her learning. And then when she has an outburst against it, she gets 1 week less of lessons as well. And then at some point, I think, during her punishment from her parents, because they grounded her and put the ring on her, she's like, can I take it off to go to my magical lesson with Lady Ariana? Because I'm going to be practicing magic and I kind of need to be able to. Which I just feel like makes sense. And her parents are angry that she asked. I was just like, I feel like the author is just adding more anger-inducing moments for the reader than necessary. Some stuff that just feels a bit unrealistic or just too far-fetched. Like, why would parents react that way? Like, just ask the question. Why would you get punished for asking? So, because they're angry that she asked, they tell Lady Ariana, and so she's got to clean the altar or some shit instead of like properly learning and following the lesson like the other students are allowed. And again, I'm just like, I don't see the fucking point of this. Why do people think a good punishment is to stop a kid from learning? No, like that would be the... Do they not see how dumb that is? It's like, don't stop people from learning. Don't stop kids from learning when you think that's the way to punish them. I don't get it. So wouldn't you want the person to learn more so that they can be more careful, more prepared, more aware, and understand better why all these rules are in place? I feel like the only way you're going to do that is by teaching them, not by taking away the teachings. All you're going to do is get an angrier teenager who's going to do more shitty things. And then the one thing that bothered me a lot, Hannah is with Veronica and then they're talking and Veronica makes an advance towards Hannah and Hannah tries to push her back. Veronica leans forward and brushes her lips against mine. I flinch back. What are you doing? Isn't it obvious? She leans forward again. Veronica, it's over between us. We have to move on. I sleep off the bed as I speak, but Veronica follows a second later, closing the distance between us. The wall ends my escape. Honey, that is sexual harassment. That is absolutely not okay. Whatever the age of the person, whether they're your ex or not, whether it's just because they're trying to get you back or not, that is not okay. It just doesn't get covered anymore in the rest so far of the book. This happens on page 155 and I'm page 238. So there's been almost 100 pages since, and not once is it mentioned that Veronica pretty much tries to force herself on Hannah. Like, I'm sorry, but none of that is okay. And I was just so bothered by it. The fact that, yeah, we're bothered by other elements of what happens with Veronica and their discussion, and there's other stuff that happens that we remember later on, that Hannah remembers later on, that she's upset about and mentions again and comes back in the conversation, etc. But not once does she think back, oh wait, what she was doing was not right. Like, I don't know, I'm just really shocked by that. I'm not okay with that at all. Yeah, that's about it. I forgot to say it is currently Monday evening. It's almost midnight, so I'm gonna call it a night. We'll read probably tomorrow during my lunchtime or something, and hope to finish the book then so I can catch up with you guys and then do a little conclusion discussion, how I feel about the book, and afterwards potentially go on to the next one. That's it. Have a good night. Okay, this is take 2 of me saying that I have now finished These Witches Don't Burn. I filmed it a first time and I don't know, the footage is like a little bit off. There's something weird about the way it was filmed that just, it's not high quality. It just doesn't look good enough. But I did want to film this conclusion again. It wasn't very long or anything. It's just to say that I finished the book. I basically feel the same about it than I did during it. I enjoyed it overall. I did think it was like a fun, fast-paced read. I like how fast the plot was advancing and how everything was moving forwards. There's so many things that have happened to the main characters, so many things non-stop, and it just felt like she couldn't catch a break, but in a good way, in a way that I personally really like in books. I hate when you stay stagnant and nothing happens, and that's why psychological thrillers are not for me. I am still bothered by the things I said I was bothered by earlier in my vlog, so I don't like the fact that there's basically a moment where Veronica pretty much sexually harasses Hannah and we just don't talk about it anymore. Like, I've reached the end of the book, it's just not talked about anywhere else and it's just ignored completely. It's like, that didn't happen. And I'm like, fair enough if you're gonna put a moment like that, but it should be a teachable moment, or it should be something that is mentioned a little bit more seriously. I just feel like it was treated as, oh, it's just what the character would do, she's so desperate, blah blah blah, or just as a plot device to annoy the main character, which I don't think is okay to do. I don't know. So yeah, the book does feel like it's a little bit more plot driven than character driven. That would be my main issue with it, regardless of all these little moments that I was like, ugh, I don't like this. Overall, I enjoyed the book. I just think that if you're into more character driven stories, you might not enjoy it as much. I thought the mystery was quite good, but I guessed quite early on who the main villain was, and it wasn't that it was predictable, it was more that the hints that we were given were a little bit too easy to guess and too easy to read, which might just be because it's YA as well, which isn't to diss YA, but I do feel like because that book felt more young than adult on the young adult scale, it might also be why some of the hints and things like that were a little bit more obvious. And in terms of the red herrings, they were a little bit either too obvious or not realistic enough. It just feels like there's a lot of like new people in town or whatever, and somehow Hannah thinks someone who's new in town may be the main suspect in this. So I wasn't really fooled by the red herrings. However, when you read a red herring, it's usually because you have another mystery, another secret that this person is going to reveal. And the secret those people revealed were actually good twists to me. Completely took me by surprise, and I really enjoyed those. I didn't think they were unrealistic, they just felt like, wow, I didn't expect that, that's cool. But yeah, to reiterate on what I said earlier, I just think that it's maybe a little bit more on the young side than on the adult side of the young adult scale. And I personally prefer when a book is slightly more adult. I just didn't really feel like the character was 17. And that might be because I've forgotten what it was like to be 17, and maybe when you're 17 you are actually younger than what I think. But there's a lot of books out there you read, the main character is 17 and they read as like, yeah, almost like an adult. But yeah, it just felt a little bit more like she was 15-year-old rather than 17. I would have believed that more. And it's not to be insulting at all, it just read slightly younger. And for that reason, maybe whenever I was picking it up, I didn't really want to pick it up. I was kind of like, oh, I kind of want to read something else. But once I started reading it, I would get really into it and would want to continue and know what happened next. So yeah, ambivalent. I don't really know how I feel about that. I think I'm rating this book 3 stars, but actually you meant 3.5, but you can't have half stars on Goodreads. But yeah, that's the idea. I think I give it 3.5 stars. It was a good read overall, fast-paced. I read it really fast in like just... Technically I didn't really read Sunday, so I guess in 2 to 3 days. For me that's quite fast, especially since I'm coming out of a reading slump, so I'm very happy about that. But I would just say it is more plot driven than character driven. It feels a little bit younger than I would like. And there are some elements of the book that felt not great to me and that weren't really addressed later on in the book. So that's my conclusion for it. Now that I have finished These Witches Don't Burn, I have also started Humble Pie, a comedy of math errors. By Matt Parker. So this was my non-fiction book that is basically stories about failures related to math and engineering and things like that that have happened in history. I'm gonna call it now. I'm currently finding it really boring and regretting picking up this book. It might just be I'm quite early on. I'm only like 50 pages in, yeah. But I just feel like the introduction was really funny, and I've got like lots of little tabs, well only 3, but you know, I could have had more in the introduction because I was like, oh that's funny, I want to mark that one. And then as I reached the first chapter and read through the whole first chapter, and then the second, because I just reached chapter 3, and chapter 1 and 2 after the introduction felt so much more boring and so much more like big heavy facts and just not as many fun small stories that I'd be like, oh my god, that's so interesting, I should tell someone about this. It just felt like I was tricked into reading this book, and like maybe the first chapter or the introduction or whatever was a trick to get me to buy it, and then once I did, it was like, aha, and the rest is not as interesting as the beginning. It did force me to, for the very first time, try audiobooks, because I'm not really big on audiobooks. I feel like, to me, that's like podcasts and then reading. I'm not a snob about it either. I feel like any way of getting the story read or listened to or whatever, that is storytelling and that's the point of a book. So who cares your format? But I personally don't love it, and I like just sitting down and reading a book on paper. But yeah, I decided to listen to it on audiobook, thinking maybe that's just going to be easier to have it in the background, I can do other stuff, and it's going to be more like listening to a podcast. And I feel like podcasts, sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm willing, or like YouTube videos or whatever, I'm going to listen maybe to more factual things, more like maybe non-fiction type of things. I noticed though, after one chapter of listening it on audiobook, that I wasn't paying that much attention, and there was a lot I was not listening to and just forgetting immediately afterwards. It was going into one ear and getting out the other. So I'm not sure that's helping. Maybe it was because it was mostly about bridges. Like the main last chapter I listened to / read was a lot about bridges, and I don't give a fuck about bridges. And apart from saying that some of them were swaying and like that was a mistake and engineers had to fix it, and on one bridge some soldiers walked all at the same time, which made the bridge collapse, and so that's why in front of the bridge now they say don't walk and sink. Yeah, that's pretty much all I remember from the chapters, which is not a lot. The rest was just a lot of facts and a bit heavy, and just, I don't know, I hope I'm not gonna completely regret it. Maybe the rest is gonna be more interesting. Maybe it was because it was about bridges and I don't care about bridges. Maybe I need to give it more of a chance. And then I will come back to you guys and let you know how I feel about it. But that's about it for now. It is currently 9 o'clock on Thursday. I'm gonna start my working day, and if I have like listened to it on audiobook while I work, then I will keep you updated later and tell you how I feel about it. Alright, bye guys! Okay, I'm so sorry for the background noise for this. I've left my little desk fan on because it is currently 33 degrees, which might not be hot for a lot of people, but it's really hot for me. It's really hot for anyone who lives in London, and I am dying and melting. Yeah, that's about it. That's my justification. If it bothers you, I'm so sorry. It's gonna be a short segment anyway. I'm just updating you guys on Humble Pie. Here's how I feel about the book at the moment. I feel like there are some chapters that I've realized, you know what, I'm not enjoying this one. I don't understand it, and it's such a struggle and such a strain to read it on. I'm just gonna stop reading that chapter, skip through it, skip a little bit and read diagonally and see where I'm actually interested and start reading again from that point on, rather than force myself through non-fiction that I'm not enjoying and overall not enjoying a book, when in reality there's plenty of passages that I'm really enjoying, and there's plenty of these little stories that I'm finding fascinating, and I've bookmarked so many of them. I have literally little post-its on so many pages, so there is a lot of good stuff in this book. It's just that there are sometimes whole chapters that I have absolutely no freaking interest in. Like, there's an entire chapter that talks about data and keeping data and errors linked to Excel. I listened to that chapter on audiobook and I actually hated it. Like, it was just so boring and I couldn't focus on it, and I was just finding that it wasn't distracting me, it wasn't interesting me enough that I would actually pay attention to what the guy was saying, and unfortunately. And there are chapters where I'm like, fuck, this entire chapter is hilarious and everything about it, I want to bookmark and I want to remember this and I want to mention this because I thought it was really funny. All the stories that were genuinely interesting, there's something about the lottery, there's something about the chances of two people being in the same picture years before they met and got married. All of those I thought were humanizing math and humanizing math errors and giving human stories, which were the interesting stories. And then every time there was something about bridges and the engineering failures behind them. And I think at some point he talks about the financial crisis and some mistakes that were made in there. I just found those really boring and couldn't hang on to them and continue reading them, so I just kept through some of that. And I think it's really because of the lack of human faces behind that, and the fact that those stories just didn't have enough humanity. I don't know. That's kind of how I felt about it. Okay, so just to film quickly a little conclusion on this book. I finished it last night. I finished it around like 9:30, 10 p.m, something like that. I'm sorry for my hand. It's not very steady. This is trembling a little bit. Yeah, I'd say I pretty much feel the same way about it as I said earlier in this vlog, that I enjoyed some chapters like a lot and thought the stories in there were like more humane and just had a lot of like interesting facts about them and things that I cared about, things that made me care about the story, especially when there was more of a human aspect to them. And then there were some chapters that I was like, gosh, this is boring and I don't really want to read the rest of it, and I would skip through a little bit and like skip some pages and then go to the interesting bits. So that's kind of how I feel about this book, kind of lukewarm. So I would give it like maybe 3 stars, which means the 2 books I've read in this vlog are a bit more on the average side and the middle ground rather than extremes. I wish I had like a 4 or 5 star book, but not this week. It's fine. Next week perhaps. There was one thing that made me laugh a lot when I was reading it, and it was about the issue between people who thought that million was like a unit measure, a measure of unit, I can't speak anymore, rather than part of the actual number. So when he tells the story about like Obamacare and he goes, an easy target for criticism was the cost of setting up Obamacare. A figure of $360 million was passed around as the cost of introducing the program. which is a large amount of money, over $1/3 billion. So people on the right of the political spectrum looked for ways to highlight just how much money it was, and this meme was born. 317 million people in America, and you spend 360 million on just introducing Obamacare. Just give each citizen $1 million. No, that would be $1 per person, not 1 million per person. Anyway, I'd say this book had kind of interesting conclusions about human error and statistics, and how towards the end of the book he talks a lot about like people not allowing people to see those mistakes, because those mistakes do not always cost lives, but they will cause panic. The fact that whatever the case, we need to rely on math, but when we rely on math, a lot of the time we rely on the human brain, and the human brain isn't perfect, and sometimes humans make mistakes. I don't know, it was an interesting conclusion, it was an interesting book overall. I like kind of where he went with it and the reasoning behind why he wrote the book. I thought that was quite interesting, but I also really wanted to start reading fiction again. I was just like, I'm bored of this now. I just want to read silly things now and not have to think about math anymore. And that's about it. I hope that my face isn't too close for comfort, and that kind of concludes this first vlog, I guess. I hope there's not too much background noise. It's 35 degrees in London right now. I am boiling, dying, melting, everything you can think of, and somehow, because I'm an idiot, I'm gonna make myself a coffee now. See you guys later.